Okay, here we are. Welcome to the Soul Wisdom Exchange. I'm Regina Curtis. I'm the creator and founder of At Matri, and I am a soul wisdom mentor. So I help people understand their ways of knowing and being, and then how those ways of knowing and being, how that wisdom speaks to and through them. And I call those soul wisdom languages. So here on the Soul Wisdom Exchange, we have conversations to explore soul wisdom and soul wisdom languages. And today, my special guest is Annette Maria. Annette, how are you today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing really well on this snowy northeastern day.
Excellent. I'm in the Midwest, but it's snowy here too. So, and a friend of mine actually posted she lives in Florida and it looks like they're getting some cold weather as well. So I think it's just cold everywhere, at least in the US.
Yep.
So welcome to this cozy winter day. And tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And let's start there.
Yeah, of course. That's always a broad question to ask, right? Because I have so many
It is.
different facets to
Yeah.
myself. So in my work and my sacred work that I do on this earth, I am the founder of Sanctuary Publishing as well as a somatic soul guide. So I merge together somatic healing and the individual souls into the work that I do with them. So really bringing the wisdom back to the body, back to themselves, and bringing back that harnessing of self-trust and all that is done. And I really believe that each one of us is limitless in our nature, and we just have been limited and then just continued those limitations in our existence. So I'm really here to create a stake in our collective energy that truly anything is possible for us if we decide to anchor ourselves into that and to choose that. So that's something that really propels me forward. And I'm really also here to feel alive, to feel expressed, to feel activated, to play, to not just be like really diligent all the time, because that's a part of myself that can get really turned on, but to also enjoy being a human, which I think
Yes.
sometimes we get wrapped up in and we forget. And I have to remind myself, like, hey, it's okay. You can actually just read a book today about not some, you can just read like a beach novel,
Yeah.
like.
I feel that I have I'm a Capricorn sun and but I also just have this like deep desire for exploring self-development and I love to create and explore. So even a lot of times my downtime is very active and it may not be active physically, but it's very active mentally. And so sometimes I think like, okay, I just need to rest and relax. How do I do that?
It's a great question.
How
Yeah.
does one do that, right? Um, I love your description and all of the things that you're doing in the world. And I'd love for you to, if you don't mind, I think somatic is a word that has been coming up a lot more and more. I've seen it used more in kind of, I don't want to say mainstream areas, but I've seen it a lot more outside of like wellness practice or something like that, body work. And I'm not sure that everyone really knows what it means. So I'd love to hear what your relationship with what your definition of somatic means.
Yeah, thank you. That's a important thing to touch on because it could mean many different things, right? Somatics is just connecting into the realm of your body, and the way people do that is very different. So when someone works with me and we enter into the somatic realm, it's entered through breath, movement, and dance. So it is a movement-based practice to anchor into how your emotions are flowing through you. So to create a healthy relationship with how emotions flow, and then also to have a dialogue occur, right? We're always in two different polarities within ourselves because we live in this dualist world. So there's always, sad and happy. Like there's like
Right.
this intrinsic dance that's occurring. And through the somatic work that I lead people through, it's about finding the common thread, that like emerged self, the truth in that moment again and again and again, right? Because we're always changing, we're always evolving. The body is always changing and evolving. So it's about creating this deeper sense of relationship with the body and having the dialogue be more expressed.
I love
But
it.
somatic can, again, mean some people experience somatic work laying down on a massage table, right? So it's very different in how it's done in its nature. So definitely check in with whoever you're speaking with, because some people are like, oh, I thought we were going to foam roll today. And I'm like, no,
Nope, that's not how I
That's not it.
Thank you for that. I think it's so important because even in my own experience, I personally have experienced different healers, body workers, energy workers, etc., that use the word somatic in a very different way and embody that in their work in a very different way. And all of them have been very, for me, they've been very pleasurable, very like healing experiences, but vastly different. So I think it is important to kind of start with like, what are we talking about? And also to say it out loud and say, it's okay to ask, right? Like if you're not sure what something means, ask and have that conversation. So,
and sometimes I think it's really important to really ask our guides or healers, mentors, whoever we're working with, to ask those questions, because it means that we're empowered in that conversation, right?
yes.
Something that I really love to now ask people is, how do you actually support me in bringing the power back to me, right? So many people may say, I make sure you have all the power, but really that's not how it gets played out in the exchange. So I love to kind of ask those questions beforehand. How am I actually empowered in this experience? How, what is your work actually like in its nature, right? Because the resonance for you is important, and for you to feel empowered in your choice is important, rather than be like, yeah, sure, maybe that'll help me. Take my money and let's go. So
right. I totally agree with that. And for you, maybe it is for each person, I think it's going to be a different question too, right? Like some people really need to know kind of like, what is the container that we're working in? And once that container is defined or clear enough that they feel safe with it, then it's like, okay, now we can explore, we can work intuitively, we can, all of that I'm open to exploring, but I need those boundaries, right? For some people, it is more a matter of what is the language that we're using, and really having that clear definition of how are we communicating. And now that we've established that framework, let's go explore, right?
Yeah.
So for you, each person has a different access point, I guess, to that, or a different part that really is resonating for them in each type of work or encounter that they have. There was, when you were explaining about, when you were describing how you utilize somatic in the work that you do and the way that you embody that in your work, two things came to mind, and I'm going to say them both, and then we can explore whatever comes up. But and I apologize because they're actually plowing the alley outside my window right now, so that's fun. Can you hear it on your side?
Yeah, I can, but it's okay.
Okay, as long as it's not like overpowering my voice. So the first thing is a state of body, and I had this come through. I was doing a yoga nidra practice, and something about those words came to me, because I think a lot of times we talk about a state of mind, but I hadn't really ever thought of state of body, right? Like the state of my body right now, it's a state of body. It can change. It can change from 1 minute to the next, just like we can change mind, that quickly. I can also change my state of body. And that was a really empowering statement for me, because I often tend to think, and I have a lot of earth energy, so I tend to think of my body as this very difficult to move thing. It's a very, not that I can't move around or be flexible, but to change my state of body has always been something that when I think about it, it's like, oh, that's a big task, right? And to completely transform, yes, that may be a big task, but there are much more subtle ways that you can do that. And so that was one thing that was coming in. I don't know if you want to comment on that or explore that a little bit?
Yeah. I think also it's important to mention, right? It's the state of the body is the state of your nervous system, right?
Mhm.
And that is what we're really working with when we are working in the realm that I guide people into, is guiding them into the realm of their nervous system. And that can really, change for so many of us in different facets. We can notice it through our breath and things, but that allows us to know that, again, we have the power to notice and to shift. And sometimes when we feel and we have other things tied to our body that make us kind of disconnect from it, maybe it's how we feel in it, pains, aches, how you were saying that, like earth energy that makes you feel like, oh, this is gonna be a lot.
It's going to be a lot.
Yeah. So it's, reconnecting to it, because a lot of us have had things that have happened that made us disconnect, disassociate from our bodies, and live in a space of trauma response most of our lives, right? Most of us live in fight or flight. And just because that's been taught, and we kind of implemented that to keep surviving. So it's coming back to a space of thriving within yourself and knowing that you no longer need to be fighting in this world, but that you can feel safe and open. So I don't really know the tangent I just walked us down, but I walked us down a tangent.
I love it. What's coming in for me to kind of bring in next is breath work, right? Like breath being that way to actually access and shift that state of body in a more, in a quicker way. And when you think about elements, I guess we're going to go down this tangent too, because I brought it in. So let's do it. So if you are very much in an earth energy, sometimes bringing in another element can help you to transform that, just like in nature, right? If something is stuck, emotion you may need to move emotions, that's water, or maybe it's a mindset that's helpful, that's air element, right? Or maybe you need motivation, that's that fire element. So yeah.
And the breath is the most, that's like the first thing that gets touched in the work, right? It's like, if we're not breathing properly, we're not going any deeper. We're not going to even explore the connection with the body, because the connection to the breath will allow you to create that sense of safety within yourself as you're moving, as you're feeling, as you're being within yourself. And the breath is the most intimate connection that we can make, because we can tap in any moment, right? It's always occurring. It's always there. And it's always a reminder and a reflection of what our inner state is, right? What the state of the body actually is. Because I may think, oh, I'm really calm right now, but really I'm just shut down. I'm just hyperventilating, breathing.
You can tell, right? Your breath is up here in your chest, and you're not, that's something that I learned at some point along my journey. And it was like this major aha moment. And I was like, how have I never thought of this before? That if you're essentially holding your breath, right? If you're breathing only in your high chest, if you think about the natural rhythm of a deep breath, right? It starts more in your belly, and it moves up and expands in your rib cage, and then it comes up here into your high chest. And that's the last part of that inhale. But if you are not feeling safe, then you're oftentimes in that fight, flight, or freeze, right? And you're in that part where you're kind of holding your breath, and your breath is very shallow. And that is a state of being as well as a state of mind, I think.
Yeah. And many of us are aware of that. When I used to be a massage therapist, and I remember working with a lot of my clients and stretching them as well. And that was kind of the first exploration of the mind-body connection in a deeper way. I taught yoga and those things, but when I started to massage and actually work with the body, it all started to click. So that was kind of the journey that brought me into the work now. But I remember telling one of my clients, she was in her late 60s, and I told her, I was teaching her how to breathe properly. And she's like, what the hell are you trying to say? That I've been breathing wrong my entire life? I'm 65 years old. And I'm I'm so sorry, but yeah. And it's not so much that it's incorrect, because the body figured out how to adapt, and it made it correct, right? Because the body's so resourceful and so adaptive in that nature. But it's the state, the energetic state, that nervous system state that she was operating in was always this running. And
Yeah.
it's not just her, it's so many people.
Yeah. I mean, and even if you do, I mean, the first time I remember ever doing any kind of breath work was actually in chorus when I was in like middle school or maybe even elementary school, where it was like, okay, sit up tall. And then we learned about our diaphragm and like how that works and why it's important to have a certain posture when you're singing. And I think that has stuck with me throughout my life, for me to have that kind of that tangible thing to hold on to when I'm like, wait, I'm not getting enough air. Oh, wait, it's because I'm actually slumped over, or I'm not, but not everybody learns that. I mean, we don't go to school and get breathing lessons in, kindergarten, which wouldn't that be amazing if we did? But
let's just write that down on the list of things to change.
Things needed
breathing
in the
lessons.
Exactly.
I think it's, for me, it feels like it's essential. Like that doesn't feel like a luxury thing to feel. Like for me, I feel like it's really important to make it accessible for everybody to understand what it means to be in a trauma response, what it means to have that fight or flight energy in you, what it's like to be on the other side, and how to bring yourself down, or how to bring yourself into a state of neutrality. Like that for me feels really important to make accessible to like everybody, because all of us have experienced trauma in some shape or form, right? In small, large, medium, whatever, if you want to call it a size, we've all experienced it in some way.
Well, when you said that, one of the things that came to mind was we're taught how to respond to emergencies, but we're not taught how to come down from that. Like what you were talking about, like that is trauma inducing. Like, I mean, I was a teacher for several years and we had to do fire drills, right? And then at some point we had to start doing bomb drills. And thank God I wasn't teaching when we had to start doing like active shooter drills and things like that. Luckily, I was not, that wasn't a part of my experience as a teacher, but I know it is very much, right? And now teachers, students, parents, whatever, everybody is dealing with like pandemic trauma and Zoom overload and like things that, there's so many things all the time, all day, every day that we are dealing with. And a lot of this, builds up. Even when we build a resilience to it, that doesn't necessarily mean that we are actually releasing it or coming back into a state of that, the parasympathetic nervous system rather than staying in that sympathetic nervous system. So, it's that trauma response. Often, even when you said that, my mind even went to like, it was more about like responding to emergency or getting yourself out of the trauma, not so much about what do you do with your body now to recover, to relax, to come back into that state of safety, of rest and receive, right?
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that about, that journey of, in school and those drills and those trainings, right? They're making us like a little edged, a little nervous, whether we know it or not. And when you were speaking of, all these things piling up, and then we think, oh, I'm resilient, I can get through anything, right? We're really just so armored that we just can't, we don't even know who we are under that armor. And I'm speaking from experience, hands up, because and also that understanding of when we don't know how to we don't know how to just like let ourselves be and relax. Yeah. We know how to maybe respond to problems and issues and keep going and keep figuring it out and, keep running essentially. But I'm still to this day working on finding full safety in letting myself be, right? There's so many layers, depends, how many, wherever you've moved through. But so many of us, that state of just being and just not needing to be or do anything, and again, just to be like breathing, is super vulnerable. And for many of us in that state is when something maybe has occurred. So we're like, oh no, I can't be vulnerable. I can't open. So I'm going to just armor up and keep going.
Right. And also often we're shamed for that, right? Like, and I don't know that actively intended to be shamed for it. Like, I don't know if that's the word that might trigger some people actually, but sometimes that shaming is coming from ourselves, right? Like, how many times have I heard myself even say, oh, I should be doing something, right? When okay, a couple days ago, this past weekend, we were, I was doing some stuff. I can't remember what I was doing. I had some things I wanted to do. So I had a plan for what my day was, and I was kind of doing that. My partner was sitting on the couch and watching some television or something. And I came out at some point, sat down, and we were, chatting and watching TV. And I think I was like eating lunch or something. And she just looked at me and was like, I'm bored. And I was like, okay, well, do you want to do something? Do you want to go somewhere? Like started trying to figure out how to help her. And she was like, no, it's okay. I can just be bored. Like sometimes I can just be bored. Not a bad state to be in. Yeah, it's true, but even my own response is to be like, how do we fill that, right? Like, how do we make sure you're not bored? And I mean, I grew up in the 80s and a lot of time spent bored as a child. There goes the snowplow again. But those lead to creativity. Those moments lead to, and I'm not just talking about boredom, but like anytime we can bring in stillness and rest and, like even a vacation. When I go on vacation, I don't go on vacation that's like go to the beach and just like sit in a chair and relax. Like that doesn't, I don't know what to do with that. Right.
Yeah.
It's not the type of vacation that I tend to take. I tend to go on vacation and like, I want to see everything and I want to see people and hang out and eat things and learn things. And that's my way, but there isn't a whole lot of space for that down, rest, receive, like those things that bring us back into that space, unless it has like a certain oh, this is my spiritual practice, or this is my, I don't know, mental health, like if it's if it's categorized in a container like that, then I think we allow it. But oftentimes if it's outside of that, it's so easy to dismiss it or even to, like I said, shame it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were speaking of with your partner, like being like, okay, let's fill it in. Let's fill in this time, right? That is it's so my nature as well. And it's like, let's just fill it all in. And it's like, I think have given, I forget where I saw this or heard this, but we have given too many things purpose. Like we think everything needs a purpose, right? Like how you were saying, if it has that proper container, then we feel like, I can let go because I'm in this space. But what about just having a purposeless day? Like not cleaning the house because you need to, or not going for a hike because it'll make you feel good and you're trying to lose weight, or not meditating to something, or not cause and effect. We're addicted to cause and effect all the time. Me too, right? Yeah. Always like, if I do this, then I'll go there, rather than just being, no cause or effect, because detaching from what may occur and just being in the moment is like my life's work, I think. But just like truly signing up.
There's a part of my brain that's like when you're saying this, I'm like, oh my God, no. But I mean, I said it too, like I totally agree that it is, but like, how do you get there? What does that even look like? What does it feel like? And I think like, you drip it in, right? You don't just all of a sudden start with, I'm going to have a weekend of just being completely okay with doing whatever comes, right? Because it's not that you're doing nothing. You're still doing something. I mean, even when you're sleeping, you're doing something, but it's that purpose piece. Like, I love that you brought in that word, because does it have purpose? Does it have meaning? It still does. Everything always does. But are you doing it because of that, or are you allowing it to unfold and receive from it?
Like, are we doing this for X effect? Like that to me is what I mean when I say the word purpose in this way. I do believe everything, has its own
Yes.
meaning, right?
Yeah.
But if we're doing something for an effect, then we're attached to the outcome.
Yeah.
No matter what. And when we're attached to the outcome, we are dragging ourselves into suffering again and again and again. And it's this pattern that we put ourselves in. And I'm speaking again for myself as well. I'm always like, let's just have a day of just like spaciousness. And then I go into like, okay, well, I'm going to meditate and do yoga and then read a book and I'm going to do this. And I'm like, okay, well, where's the space, honey? I'm like,
Yeah.
where is the space? Like petting myself.
Right.
My partner, I call him the pillar of neutrality because he's always just like this, just pillar that just is unshakable. He's always just like, but what about nothing? Like nothing with the intention of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And what that could look like, I mean, it's very dependent on each person, but I think just even giving ourselves 20 minutes maybe in our day, right, to just like kind of be like, what feels good, or what can we do that we're not attached to the outcome, whatever that is. For me, it's doing like pieces of artwork that I'm just like, or pottery. Actually, it's a big one for me because pottery was such a teacher of like, I'm going to be really good at this. And I was really not. The mud taught me really quick that I'm not good at it. And then if I try and be in control, I'm going to get splattered on. But it was like in those moments, right, to just do it, to be with the mud rather than doing it to like create these beautiful things and to become this potter,
Yeah.
It's like finding some activity that lets you be a humbled being. And for me, that's pottery. But, for everyone else, I think it's just discovering what that could be. And then I started attaching things to pottery, like, oh, I can start doing, and then I'm like, okay, well, maybe I need to find another purposeless like home for me to be in.
Right.
So.
It's interesting because like that's art for me. And it was hard for me to get to that space because I went to school to be an art teacher. Mm-hmm. And so like first I went to art school, then I was teaching art. And I mean, talk about placing purpose on something. I went into it because I loved doing it. It was a peaceful thing. It was an exciting thing for me. And then I put so much, I packed around that purpose container of like, this is the effect, right? Now I do this for money. I show up, I teach people how to do this. And then that's my income. As soon as you put income on something, it's like another layer of purpose and meaning and reason for doing it, that effect, the cause and effect that you were talking about. And it wasn't until I started to ironically, when I was an art teacher, I made hardly any art at all. Like I didn't, I made art every single day because I was making examples for students or I was like demonstrating something, but I made very little art for me to make just because I wanted to make it. Yeah. Then I worked in an art college. Then I moved into educational travel and I got completely away from it. But the whole time I was craving, I want to make art. I want to make art. I want to make art. My house has been packed with art supplies always. Half the time when I was traveling all the time, I would bring art supplies with me. I've carried them all over the world and never used them. Yeah. And then it wasn't until, I really had an opportunity to just be, when, the whole world kind of came to a pause at the beginning of 2020. And I found myself in my art studio making a bunch of crap that I hated, but I just wanted to make stuff. And it wasn't about, I was making something because I was making it to sell it, or I was making it to, whatever. I didn't really have anything. I was bored, right? I had things to do, but mentally I was bored. I wasn't traveling anymore. I wasn't doing all these things that I was doing. And there was this irritation, this itchiness of oh, what do I do with this? What do I do? And so I started creating. I started making art. And like I said, at first I hated most of it because it was like when you turn on the hose and all it hasn't been on for a long time and like all this gross stuff.
Just like
and then I got these quantum leaps of I really connected with my creative voice. And it actually ended up, I connected with my soul wisdom. Like art is a huge, I don't know, huge isn't even the word for it. I mean, it is a part of who I am and how I express myself. And through going through that process of just being with it is how it really came through to me as like, oh, this is why I've craved this my entire life, is because this is a part of who I am. And then I started to bring it into my business. And then but I was bringing it in this different way where it was like, not because I wanted to use this as a tool to bring me something, because there was no way for me to not have it be a part of the experience any longer. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, but absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's just that you're like, this is me and my business, and art is a major element of me. So it's coming along. It's coming along. But it holds a different frequency, right? When we're just like, that's what kind of happened with pottery. I was like, oh, maybe I'll start making like ceremonial mugs. And because I host, different ceremonies with cacao and different elements. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll bring, but it just like, it was not like a weighted thing. Like, oh, and then you're going to start doing all these things and you're going to create an Etsy, it wasn't like weight. It just was like, oh, this feels playful. And like, maybe this will have a vehicle to keep going, but I want it to continue to feel playful. And I think as just beings, we just desire to just create, whether it's we're baking, we're making art, we're building something. I think we just desire to put our hands in or on something that we could feel and be a part of. It's like a deep craving, I think, within us.
Well, I mean, we are nature, right? We are, at the very core of things, we're an animal, right? Like we are a part of nature. And so when we can make and create, like that's a part of our nature as well. I mean, everything in nature is creating and releasing and growing and evolving all the time, and we are too. And when we're not able to find that rhythm in our work, in our daily life, then that is a missing piece, right? That oftentimes you'll see people will say, oh, I picked up this hobby, right? And they call it a hobby, but really it's like a life passion. It is a soul wisdom language. It is, and it's like, well, but it's not my job. And so therefore we don't necessarily always give it as much value as it really does, but it feeds our soul.
Yeah. I think the tangibility is something that many of us desire, right? To see like, how will this tangibly, again, we're like addicted to what will this give me? Right. And yeah, I think having that exchange for it to just be something that you enjoy and to hone in on that is another element to feel more and more like you, right? Not like you're like just bogged down by life, but that you can thrive, Again, how I was saying, a lot of us, are stuck in surviving, but when we can drop back into that sense of thriving, into that space of being able to rest and feel safe within us, then I feel like then we can start to even imagine or think of doing things of that nature. But when we're stuck in that mode of surviving, and just like your body is just like, we just need to make it to the next day, like do whatever it needs to get there, because that was instilled via trauma, via generational pain, via whatever it may have been. And it's like that unraveling to come back to, okay, this is who I am.
I love it. There's also, one of the things that was coming in was Again, two things were coming in, but one of them was thriving. When you look at a tree or a flower or something like that, and you say, oh, wow, it's really thriving. It's big and it's luxurious and it's lush, right? Like the colors are, you can tell that it's like really vital, getting all the things. But they get that way because they're getting the proper nutrition, the proper amounts of light and rest, right? Like light and dark. The weather is, like the weather is supportive, the environment is supportive of this being having its most aligned environment, like the things that are most serving that, right? But as humans, we often look at like, oh, if I'm thriving, that means that like I'm well rested, or I don't know. I think of these things now, but I didn't always. Like if I would have, let's go back like 20 years, if I thought of thriving, I would have thought like, oh, if I'm thriving in my life, that means I have a nice car and I have, these nice things and I have the ability to travel wherever I want. Now, when I think of thriving, I would say some of those things are still in there, but I know now and am more tuned into the reason I'm doing that is because I'm doing something I love, because I'm getting the proper amount of rest. I have the energy in my physical resources as well as my financial resources, etc., to do these things and have these things and go to these places. And it's more about what it is that I'm receiving rather than what it is I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And thriving is being a part of that cycle, right? How you were saying the light and the dark, like that tree is a part of the cycle. It's not trying to alter the cycle and be like, no, stay in the light, stay in the light. Oh, go in the dark. It's like like winter right now, right? Like looking at the trees, like they're in the dark.
Yeah.
They're in the dark. Birds right now, they're frustrated. They're like, I want fucking food. Like, like I want abundance of food. Like there is this agitation that occurs when we're thriving as well. But that agitation, right? The friction is what will allow more to blossom. That is what allows that space of emergence to occur when we can sit in friction. Like just because we have friction within us doesn't mean that we're not in the space of thriving, right? It doesn't have to always mean a certain thing, but it's allowing ourselves to be in these cycles, live in the cycle as if a tree would. I think if we're ever kind of confused or stuck or overwhelmed, just like go outside, look at what's happening and be like, okay, is that what's happening in me, right? Is there a death occurring, right? We're in wintertime right now. Is there a death occurring? Are we frustrated? Are we aching and craving for change and for newness, If so is nature, right? It's that the dance between it all, and know that the spring will come, but there's medicine in the reprieve, right? There's medicine in this space that we're in.
I love that. And I love that you asked it as a question. Is that what's happening for me? Because one of the things that I do in the work that I do with one-on-one with my clients and in group programs too, is we look at what are your cycles and rhythms, and then also bring awareness to the cycles and rhythms that are happening around us. So for me personally, I'm in a winter season right now. I know that, in my kind of astrological chart in my houses, I'm in more of a very internal individual kind of going within inner growth kind of season, right? Like a more yin season. And that happens to align with what's going on outside in nature. It's not necessarily what's going on with my partner. I look at hers as well, because being in our house together, like living with the people that you're living with, it's also important to know kind of what are the cycles and rhythms of the people around you. And, as luck would have it, it has nothing to do with luck, but she happens to be like completely flipped in the way that her cycles and seasons move. So like when she's more in an outward, like wanting to be with other people, wanting to connect with people, it's the time that I'm most wanting to go within. And so you have to kind of figure out like, how does that work? And how do you both get what you need out of that? And then what's going on outside in nature, what's happening in the collective, what's happening in your, in the different spheres of influence that you have. And asking that question of like, is that what's happening for me? If it is, can I learn from that, right? If it's not, what can I take from that? Is there a way that maybe I need to be supported, that I'm not getting supported because this is what's happening around me, and there's something I need that not everybody else does right now? And how do I honor that as well as honor what others need, right? Like there's that, it's that curiosity and that exploration that really can be so supportive and so empowering to help you and also your relationships.
Absolutely. And then even, where you and your partner are, that creates a friction point, right? In some capacity. And friction is not bad. I think a lot of us kind of run from it. We're like, oh no, we want to be like really great all the time. But that friction, right? It's not like there's not gonna be like if two watery people were together, let's just say, right? They would just be water all the time. No one would go anywhere. They'd just be like emotionally just like, whoa. But if, that's why it's important to have the opposite, to have these friction points, because through friction, that is where fire, sparks, wherever can be arise from. But then that's also where we learn, we evolve, we grow. And right now in the world, right, we're in a major friction point, right? And it's like from this, we can only grow if we choose to, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that. I think it's like becoming more and more welcoming, how your partner was like, she let herself be bored the last weekend, right? Like letting ourselves experience these points of maybe emotions or feelings that maybe we don't deem as great or positive or whatever. I don't believe in like morality in emotion world, but we tie the morality to how we're feeling often, but just letting ourselves be wherever we currently are and knowing that that is correct for us.
Yeah. And there's, there's so much power in all of our emotions. And sometimes if somehow emotions became this like demonized thing, right? Like, I mean, there's lots of ways that I could highlight how that has happened, but I won't go down that path right now. But we have tried to remove that part of ourselves from like our work, our relationships, our like somehow it's like, oh, well, if we allow those emotions to be present, then we're emotional, and that means that we're not thinking correctly, or that means that we're too something or not enough something, or whatever. But we are human, and humans have emotion. It's part of our humanness. And if we try to remove a major facet of our humanness from how we act and interact with other humans, then we end up not bringing our full self to the table, right? And not bringing our full abilities or our full awareness. And that's the point in which we become overly something, because when you squish something down or push it away or try to repress it or, not allow it, then it builds up. And eventually that comes out in a way that is not necessarily the way that you intend it to or want it to. And that's how I think, we get to that point where it's like, oh, that's too much. Like that's over the top or whatever. And it's like, well, if this was able to come out when I first felt it, if we were able to explore it then, instead of pretending that it didn't matter, instead of trying to make it not matter, and it didn't have the opportunity to like build up to the point of where some tiny little thing pushes you over the edge and then it like explodes out of you in whatever form that is, then it wouldn't have been a problem, right? But now it is. And now we have to deal with it. And then there's this like, then we layer on top of that guilt and shame and discomfort and all of the things, right?
Yeah. And when we, again, it's like the layers become then the armor. And then we're like, and then that like ties it back to the beginning, right? That like our seed of sensitivity was probably something that caused us seeming harm in some capacity, right? As children, as babies. And it may have been innocent in its nature, how it occurred, right? But that seed of sensitivity that maybe you cried and someone told you, yeah, stop crying already. And they're frustrated about something. But you're like, okay, I can't cry anymore, whatever it is. And then the armor builds. And then we grow up as these beings with these armors all around us, and then trying to get everyone else into their proper armor so that we feel comfortable in this fucking army, when rather we're then just robotically moving through the world and not actually presently there. It's like, even when everyone's like, hey, how are you? Everyone, good, I'm good, everything's good.
Immediately it's like,
and I do it too, and I'm just always like, what else can I say right now? Like, am I actually in that moment, or am I just kind of like moving through the motions and just kind of like guarded because I'm like, oh no, person's asking me how I am, like, and
because I think you're also sometimes afraid that all that's going to come out, right? If you're like, oh, I'm not really great today, can you stop it there? Or does it, well, why, right? Because somebody's going to ask you a question, why? And then, then what's going to happen? Is it all going to come out? Are you going to start talking about how you were triggered by whatever? And who knows, right? And that's not a realm that we often explore.
Yeah. But I greatly appreciate when I get the random barista, random person that's like, I'm not that good. And I'm like, I understand, and not even trying to be like, oh no, let me fix you. Let me, are you going to be okay at work? Being like, yeah, I get that, and I think it's just like refreshing. I think we're all kind of craving like some refreshment, and that refreshment, I think, could be felt the more and more we get to know who we are under the armor. When we start to remove those pieces and start to more and more connect to that. The seed of softness is just something that I've heard. I really resonate with that term because it's something that's planted within us. And if we don't let it grow, it just kind of gets stifled and it just gets kind of dried up. But really the seed, if we nurture it, will blossom because it's a gift that we all have to give one another. Because through that sensitivity, we're then better able to have more compassion to hold space in a different way. So
I love it. I love it so much. So tell us, I think this is actually a great place to come in and talk about how somatic work and the work that you do, like how can that support people in really kind of taking off some of that armor and finding that seed of softness and nurturing it?
Yeah. So through the work that I lead people into, you get to know who you are. There's no more hiding yourself. You get to meet the masochist within you, the one who wants to burn down a house. You get to meet the one who's the lover within you. You get to know all the archetypes that make up who you are, right? So in that space, when you get to know yourself more and more and more, then the more you see, like you can't unsee what you see within yourself, right? So I think that maybe is why a lot of people are nervous to step into that work because they're like, oh shit, like where are we going to go? And I get that. And I get that often because people get nervous of, oh no, like it's not safe to be in this intensity. But when we start to peel back the layers, so it kind of works in different layers usually we start with getting to know our emotions, right? How we relate to our emotions, how to actually express anger, disgust, pleasure, happiness, how to let ourselves actually be in a state of expressing that. And so that's always the first layer. And I think when we start to get to know our emotions, give those the kind of floodgates that they're desiring to just kind of move through you and move on, right? They're not asking for you to sit and sulk for years or days.
Right.
They're literally just asking you, feel the anger, let it go. Feel the sadness, let it go. Feel the happiness, move on, right? It's not to get attached to the high or to the low. It's just like feel and keep just flowing and moving. And then we go deeper into the other layers of self. So it's kind of just like moving deeper and deeper and deeper into your truth, right? Into how I was saying, the polarities that exist always kind of fine tuning who is here that's emerging, who is this. And this is just a constant evolution that happens. But I really teach people the tools so that they can then walk away and understand how to move themselves through polarities, how to move themselves through these emotions, that they can feel trust within themselves to hold all of who they are. Because I think a lot of us don't trust ourselves to hold all of it because it feels like a lot.
Yeah. And it can be, at times, especially we don't have the training in how to do that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that somebody else needs to train you how to do it, but more so maybe remember that you are capable and that you do have the capacity to do it. So
yeah. And that state of remembrance is key. I think that's with anything that we're doing. It's not like if it feels like too fancy and too reinventing of the wheel, it's probably too distracting and pulling you away from actually what's needing to be done.
right.
And I think really in terms of any spiritual work, healing work, it's just a remembrance. You're coming back and you're remembering who you are,
Yeah.
innately are. And that can really be felt through the way that I hold space for people in that way, because I really want someone to feel like they can hold themselves in that process. And yes, it's important to then know when to ask for support and when to lean on people, but when do we often or when are we leaning too much, right, to one side of that polarity, and like to bring ourselves back into a state of neutrality with our life and what we're moving through.
Beautiful. And that brings us kind of back to the very beginning of coming into your breath, right? And tuning in and seeing, okay, where am I right now? And then you have those tools to say, okay, so here I've identified, and now what do I do with that? How do I support that?
Yeah.
So, beautiful. Thank you so much, Annette. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed it so much. And I know we've had a couple people here in and out, and it's been great to have you here with us live. If you're watching this later, it's great to have you here as well. So thank you so much. If you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever you're watching on, don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow so that you get updates when we go live again. And Annette, thank you for being here. I'll be back again next week, and we'll see you then.
Thank you so much for having me. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.